criticism, a few dominant contemporary trends. We have Honorable Research Person, Sri P. Renga Ramanujam, sir, and the moderator for today's webinar is Professor T. Vishnu Priyam. Once again, I welcome you all, and I request Kavin to start ELTAI promo video. English Language Teachers Association of India is the largest network of English language teachers across India. We organize various events, and this webinar is one of such events. It is 115th webinar, so 115 is a very big number. And to know about ELTAI more, here is the video. Thank you, Kevin. And this is what ELTAI is, and ELTAI stands for over 5,000 members. Dear friends, let me tell you once again that certificates are given only to ELTAI members, students, and foreign nationals. And the feedback link will be provided in the chat box during the question answer session. So once again, I welcome you all to this ELTAI webinar number 115. Today's resource person is Professor P. Renga Ramanujam, sir. He is the former PRO Vice Chancellor, IGNOU, New Delhi. He is a reputed writer, educationist, and a social activist. And let me introduce today's very wonderful, dynamic moderator, Professor T. Vishnu Priyam. He has been working as an assistant professor of English at KIT Institute of Technology, Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu. He has worked in Law College and Arts College earlier with disciplined soul in teaching. Keenly involved in interdisciplinary research, he has published in refereed journals and has presented research papers at national and international conferences. An active participant of various boards and a passionate researcher, he is a member of 15 editorial boards and 12 reviewer boards of many international and national journals. He is a certified NLP master practitioner from the Academy of Modern Applied Psychology. He is a certified soft skill trainer from Rotary International and an online tutor who teaches past skills and life skills. He holds various India Book of Records and is an awardee of many teaching awards at the global and national levels. The awards such as Best Faculty Award, Best Young Faculty Award, Outstanding Educator Award 2018, Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan Lifetime Achievement National Award, and Young Educator Award from global and national organizations are some of the awards that he has received. So great, incredible moderator we have today. And now I request Honorable Moderator Vishnu Priyam sir to take the charge of this session. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Vaibhav, for your introduction. And dear participants, today we have a person who was something different with the compromising the first small and big compromises of human foibles and many. And good evening all today. Professor Ramanujam. Okay, he's a writer in Tamil and English, an internationally known educationist and a social activist. He has written 2 novels in English, 2 in Tamil, and 2 non-fictional books in Tamil, besides 6 books on literature and 100 research papers. He has traveled in 55 countries. He is a wheelchair user due to child polio, but he is a person who has been with a quest for reconciliation that Marxist encounters with modernism, Marxism, ideology, and literary criticism, and his books on reflections on distance education for India and globalization, education and open distance learning, and some of his titles extensively cited by scholars around the world. He has co-edited Higher Education in India, The Crisis in Management with former IGNOU Vice Chancellor. And he has played a vital role in setting up the sophisticated multimedia lab of the Inter-University Consortium. And as a master trainer, he has connected around 500 workshops and acted as a consultant to a member of the national and international organizations. In particular, and I would like to showcase a few of his works, that his books encounters about the contemporary scenarios in the universities. And his books, Sunset at Dawn, is completely about the dream of 300 million children in India and how the developing world drop out of school before they reach the 10 years of age. And this work of art touches upon with the issue that bogged over the rural India for a century. In a honest portrayal of life of an Indian village, he narrates the story of character as a bright student who was compelled to be stopped for his schools due to the unavoidable circumstances at home. And the next of his book of Nexus of Intrigues, which is about of tensions at different levels of characteristics of life of university in India. Skillful negotiations and manipulations often succeeded while straightforwardness and hard work get ignored or sidelined by the things. And the work of art and its characters, which has been different social, economic, geographical backgrounds, and it gives the different plot structure over there. The divide between the urban elitism, rural backwardness, that is the prime movers, and his novel deals with the daily needs of very interesting men and women that always we have. The once a manipulator is always manipulated. That is what I could read from his book. And his books always covers up with the touch upon with the Marxist system and how the teaching faculties that we touches upon, how he could interrelate with this. Such a kind of man of letters that he's been compared with his work of art. And really, sir, really was so good with his literary criticism and the theories of it, how he was being so disciplined with his work of art. which means including the Marxist criticism, Freudian, psychological criticism, feminist criticism, deconstructionism, almost all the modern critical works that he has been touched upon in his work of art. Really, we are so happy to have you here, sir. And it's our privilege that to have you in the ELTAI forum. Sir, it's up to you. Sir, you can turn on your audio.
Thank you, Dr. Vaibhav and Vishnu Priyan, for a very generous introduction. It is exactly more than 42 years since I gave my last lecture on literature. For the last 42 years, I kept literature and literary criticism aside, since I was dealing with open distance learning, online education, higher education, and so many issues related to sociological, historical, and epistemological issues. And I'm really grateful that ELTAI, particularly my friend, Professor Ilango, who persuaded me to give a talk on literary criticism and allowed me the freedom to choose the title, which I thought would be much more convenient for me, since I ceased to focus on any narrow area of specialization. It was a compulsion. I would like to say that literature was my first love, and my profession as a distance educator became an arranged marriage. Luckily, I'm happy with my first love and also the arranged marriage, because there are no quarrels. Rather, they are complementarian. And therefore, I thought it is better that I turn to my first love and ask her to inspire me once again to talk about literary criticism for the benefit of such wonderful group of teachers of English who are members of ELTAI. Literature, of course, can be defined in so many different ways. As compared to the definition of literature, definition of criticism is relatively easy, because you can document the developments historically, categorize them into various schools of criticism, whereas literature as such cannot be defined. You can go on debating what is literature and give endless answers. That is the beauty of it. It is as varied and as complex and as non-stoppable, from growing from one form into another, providing one content to another, and therefore it can be compared only with the movement of life itself. As far as criticism is concerned, I don't think it can be strictly separated from literature. Literary productions in themselves can offer so many clues and insights about literary criticism. In fact, criticism derives from the Greek word krites, which means judge. In other words, when you are reading a work of art, whether it is from the Greek times, Homer's Iliad, or the contemporary one, for example, James Joyce, it is impossible to keep literature as purely creative, independent of judgment and criticism. So that is the most important insight that I have developed. When you are reading, you are not only reading for the plot or the characterization, but you are also bring in your own view of the work of art. From the work of art, you get so many insights to understand what goes on in your own experience, in your own inner world, your subjectivity. So this interaction between the literary text and the reader is very important because criticism is fundamentally based on three important premises. One is the philosophical foundation. The second one is language. The third is the act of creating a work of art, irrespective of the genre. And therefore, this literary criticism is very vast. It is not confined to only one particular language. But out of necessity, we have to limit ourselves to reflect on some major trends, contemporary trends, particularly within the context of English literature and literary criticism. And therefore, I hope you will not mind if I deviate a bit from pure literary criticism to other related disciplines and then come back to the literary critical schools which pertain to English literature as such. So criticism ultimately helps us to assess and evaluate any work of art. But while doing so, under what conditions we approach the text and with what previous experience we bring in our own ideas of literary criticism. These are important premises. In fact, in English literature, normally we start with the Dryden and Pope, Alexander Pope, and Dr. Samuel Johnson's beautiful commentaries on Shakespeare. And then we move on to a different works of art where criticism is embedded. A great genius like Shakespeare himself becomes in some way or other at various places, but I can cite only one example. When in Julius Caesar, when Mark Antony gives that famous speech, and when the populace of Rome rise in revolt to take revenge on the killers of Julius Caesar, the mob attacks a fellow called Cinna, and thinking that Cinna the senator. And when he is caught, Cinna says, "Oh, I am not Cinna the senator, I am Cinna the poet." Then one of the persons from the crowd says, "Kill him for the bad verses." Now that is a critical remark from Shakespeare himself through one of his characters. So these are embedded, and these embedded criticisms need to be brought to light only through people who train themselves as critical readers. Now, what is the purpose of criticism? The purpose of criticism is to read any text closely, objectively, comprehensively, and then see whether the work of art has internal consistency, whether it reflects the reality of the world which it is dealing with, or the reality of life itself. I think that once again, I can cite Shakespeare holding the mirror up to nature. It is based on the philosophical concept of reflection of reality. In philosophical traditions, you have two major schools of thought: Western philosophy, idealism and materialism. Idealism looks at every phenomenon as a reflection of the mind. It is the idea, and it develops into various forms. And the great philosophers like Immanuel Kant and Hegel, they thought about this in a very, very comprehensive manner, and they thought that is always a reflection of the reality through your ideas. Now, this is called the idealistic school of thought. On the contrary, you have materialism. Within materialism, you have different schools. I will come to that in a moment. Materialism thinks that there is a reality of the world or the universe or the phenomenon which is independent of your mind. And that is called the materialist matter. Matter is first and the idea comes later. To give an example, we can now safely conclude maybe a few millions ago, there was no human life, at least on this earth. But then the earth was there, the planetary systems were there, the universe was there, but they existed in their motion, in their changing forms, irrespective of the fact that there was no human being, human mind. So the debate focuses on which comes first, matter or spirit or the idea. So the materialist school of thought thinking places matter as first, not this one. So as Marx says, the matter precedes the mind. In fact, matter produces all forms of nature, and within nature, the human being has to be placed. And human being itself is a product of nature. And what is the relationship between the human being and nature? The human being has a wonderful mechanism called the mind. The mind tries to appropriate or understand, comprehend what exists outside it. This reflection of the outside world in the mind of the human being produces ideas, concepts, formulas, and so many rules and everything. But then when you relate them to literature, you come to the debate of what literature reflects. Reflection theory. Literature reflects the life of a particular era, particular stage in history. And this reflection theory tells us that the development of the plot, development of characters, development of the story is not eternal. It is conditioned by the historical factors. And then when one moves from, say, Homer's epic or from Ramayana and Mahabharata to the most modern literary work, you will see the development in a flow, and the different forms and the different styles, the different contents. These are all reflections of the development of society in various stages. Now, what is the business of literary criticism? Criticism has to understand how a particular writer or an artist is preoccupied with certain issues which he is so passionate about and creates the characters or the story out of his own involvement with the life as it moves. Now, this is the basis. At one time, there were no such schools like historical criticism, psychoanalytic criticism, feminist criticism, new criticism, Marxist criticism, and all this. I think these are developments of the last 1 century, more particularly the 20th century, and maybe the latter part of 19th century, because they reflected on the changing scenario of literary field from the epic poetry of heroic age. You move on to metaphysical poets, Elizabethan poets, then the drama, the poetry, and then prose. It goes on taking different forms, and these are all easily relatable to the changing society. For example, if we try to compose an epic like Homer or Valmiki or Vyasa, I don't think it will have the same form or the same content. You can create a modern epic, there's no doubt about it. As one of the great Indian novel by Shashi Tharoor, he appropriates so many characters from Mahabharata to portray the contemporary life of Indian. But that is only in the form, as a technique, as a strategy. But it cannot be compared with either Mahabharata or any other epic. It's mainly because the changing reality of life persuades the literary critics to formulate their ideas into definite streams with which they are engaged. And therefore, when we talk about literary criticism, particularly from the Western point of view, we have to take into account philosophy, language, and the creative piece as such. In fact, Western philosophy started in 800 BC. Then the clearest expression came from Plato's Republic, then moves on to Aristotle. And for every Western scholar, whether it is literature or philosophy or politics or science, the starting point is Aristotle. And we too start with Aristotle's Poetics. But that doesn't answer many of the questions that we are engaged in the contemporary world. And therefore, we move on to the new developments. In the 19th century, there were clear trends in literary production, mostly in the form of novels and later short stories. There are a few trends which are called realism, naturalism, symbolism. Realism is a portrayal of life in its totality, in its entire movement. I mean, it doesn't mean it captures the entire world. When the writer takes up a particular theme, the theme itself becomes self-contained, and within that, it presents and there has to be internal consistency. Great writers like Balzac or Cervantes or Dickens, George Eliot, all of them belong to this tradition of realism. As opposed to realism, you have naturalism. Naturalism is like photography. You take a few photographs and put them in front of the reader or the viewer. And that naturalism is represented by writers like Zola. But then, what is the conflict? The conflict is realism tries to go deeper, beyond the superficial details of everyday life. It tries to figure out the essence of a particular world in which the characters live. Whereas naturalism goes on describing, this is what George Lucas, one of the greatest Marxist critics, would say, that it is the reality which is reflected in realism that is much more important than the details so faithfully reported by writers like Zola, but missing the real essence of a life that is portrayed. Now, this is a very interesting debate. Realism versus naturalism. And then you have symbolism. Symbolism is far more richer, and then it yields to different interpretations depending on the background of the reader. Even the great poet W.B. Yeats is a master of symbolism, but at the same time, the realistic content of W.B. Yeats' poetry is appreciated by everyone. Now, when you put all these things together in the 20th century, you have the historical criticism on the basis of Freud's interpretation of dreams and other important works. You have psychoanalytical criticism, and then you have feminist criticism, because even George Eliot, whose name was Mary Ann Evans, she could not write under her own name, like the Bronte sisters or Jane Austen. They also had that hesitation whether their works will be appreciated because of the place of women in that particular society. So, as a revolt against the traditional concept of a woman or the place of women in general, feminism arose in the United States and Europe. It's a very, very vast area. I would not like to get into it right now. But from the feminist point of view, literary critics, not only women, but even men who adopt that perspective, they come out with feminist criticism. Now, I would like to reflect a little on Marxist criticism. I am not really evaluating or ranking the importance of these critical schools, but since I am more involved in Marxist criticism, I would like to reflect on the importance of Marxist criticism. Marxist criticism is based on the worldview of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and Lenin. Now, these are the three great masters of revolutionary Marxist philosophy. And they have given extensive insights and comments on literature and art. They are primarily revolutionaries. They were not novelists. They were not poets. Although Marx wrote hundreds of poems to Jenny Marx when he was young. And he also wrote a novel, which he never published. He didn't get to finish and publish a novel. But he had such a vast experience in reading and appreciating the great masters. He knew the whole of Dante by heart in the Italian original, and he appreciated Homer, and he knew hundreds of lines from Homer. And Shakespeare was the kind of companion in the house of Marx. His daughters, they would perform the plays of Shakespeare. And many of them knew. Jenny Marx also wrote a few pieces on the performance of some of the plays of Shakespeare in her own lifetime. Now, this is an aside, but what is important is how they looked at art and literature. They said great literature in some way or other must reflect the moment of history in its authenticity in a realistic manner so that the reader would understand what exactly is happening in that world which he is reading about. So that is why they get so much of appreciation for Shelley, for Shakespeare, for Mrs. Gaskell, Dickens, and so many other, Balzac, Cervantes, and all. Now, based on their ideas, Marxist critics developed a more comprehensive literary criticism. And the chief among them is George Lukács. And he has extensively discussed how the Marxist methodology, Marxist perspective can help us to understand so many complexities of the modern developments, modern literary works. Now, he places modernism and realism as two rival concepts. He appreciates the 19th century realism and expects the 20th century writers to follow that realistic tradition. On the contrary, he criticizes modernism not about their artistic techniques or literary styles, but the perspective, the worldview. This worldview is the most important thing for Lukács when he assesses the modernist writers. A whole lot of them, whether it is T.S. Eliot or James Joyce or D.H. Lawrence, and the whole lot of the modernist writers who flourished in France, Germany, Italy, and Russia. And you must have heard about the schools like Dadaism, Surrealism, Impressionism, Expressionism, Futurism, all of them were different branches of modernism. And Lukács' criticism of their works of art was on the basis of their worldview, whether they were reflecting the moment of history in its true portrayal, or it is dominated by their subjectivity, only the subjective worldview which distorts reality. Now, this also has to be understood in the context of the historical movements, the people's movements, and particularly after the 1917 Russian Revolution and the period between the two world wars, the rise of fascism, Popular Front, and all of them. Now, Lukács was also challenged by other Marxist critics like Bertolt Brecht and so many others. Brecht, particularly, he challenged Lukács that Lukács himself was bound by his conventional, traditional understanding of realism. He said, modernism has certain techniques which realism cannot capture, particularly the montage technique. And he comes very heavily on Lukács that he is very conventional and he is not revolutionary enough. Now, the debates among the Marxists is really very fascinating. I would recommend that you can read Ernst Bloch, Bertolt Brecht, George Lukács, and many others. And the related school was the Frankfurt School, Theodor Adorno, Horkheimer, and Walter Benjamin. All of them belong to the Marxist tradition. And you also have French Marxists, Italian Marxists. If I name them, I think it will take another 10-15 minutes. I would not like to do that. Considering the shortage of time, I would like to make certain final statements. All critical schools, particularly new criticism and feminist criticism, deconstruction, all have their own contributions to understand the text. But in my view, the Marxist criticism gives you clarity and the heightened consciousness. It is not original in any sense. It only comprehends the phenomenon or the work of art and tries to capture the issues by its roots. That is radicalism. What is radical, as Marx said, is to grasp the problem by its roots instead of counting the leaves and touching the branches. When you go to the roots of any particular aesthetic issue, problem, then your perspective, your understanding, and your comprehension becomes quite different. And you reach such heights from where you can see so many things in a different light and a more clearer vision. And this is what has happened in the practical demonstrations. I would conclude by referring to Lenin's two articles on Tolstoy. Tolstoy as a mirror of Russian Revolution and Tolstoy the artist. Tolstoy philosophically was thus the opposite of Lenin or even other Marxists. But Tolstoy, when he portrays the reality of life in his contemporary Russia, particularly in the most important novels like Anna Karenina and War and Peace, Lenin appreciates how, in spite of Tolstoy's conservative or even reactionary philosophy, portrays the reality of Russian life in all its comprehensiveness, in its movement, and helps the revolutionary movement to understand the reality of Russian society, whether it is the portrayal of a music is a peasant, a serf, or a worker, or the landlord. Tolstoy is faithful. So he is so authentic that you can understand much better than reading any kind of economic, even historical documents. The same thing, Balzac in France, He was an aristocrat. He was not a revolutionary. He was not even a democrat. But his realistic method portrays, particularly in the novels like The Peasants and Lost Illusions, how the old order of French feudalism was giving way to the rising bourgeoisie, and how the bourgeoisie, or the bourgeois world, was developing its own contradictions from within, indicating the movement of French society in a historical perspective, and how it was bound to lead to further revolutions. And these are some of the reflections the Marxist critics are so particular about, and they never pretend to say that their word is final. They say, you just look at the context in which a particular work of art was produced, and look at the perspective of the writer, look at the worldview of the writer, try to understand, and then see what happens within the work of art. So this is something I thought is very important when we look at other schools like new criticism and so many others, whether it is Derrida or Roland Barthes and structuralists. They always treat the work of art separated from the movement of history as a question of language, as a question of form, as a question of the writer's creativity, whereas Marxist criticism tries to take a total view of the writer's perspective, the writer's worldview, and in spite of the perspective, what really emerges in a realistic work of art, indicating the truth about life and its nuances and the richness. Under this, Lukács puts so many great writers from Germany, from Russia, from Britain, France, and so many. It's a vast ocean. It's impossible to summarize all this, but I am only giving a few hints so that it would encourage you to go to George Lukács' important works like The Meaning of Contemporary Realism, Writer and Critic, Studies in European Realism, Historical Novel, and a few very beautifully written treatises on Marxist aesthetics. I think I would stop here because I don't know, the moderator is keeping the time in view, but I think it's better to wait for question and answers. Thank you.
Sir, it was a detailed illustration that you have been giving with the Shakespeare and all kinds of literature with Marxist theories and so many approaches. And there were a few questions from the participants. Simplify the Marxist feminism. Could we find still the writers of the moment in the contemporary society? The question is from Swarna Sri. She's about Marxist feminism. Is there still any writers there?
Marxist feminism. I'm trying to understand the question.
She's asking about simplify in the terms of Marxist feminism. Could we find still the writers of this movement in this contemporary society? She's asking about any even still they were being available there about Marxist feminism, the concepts.
Conceptually, feminism comes very close to Marxism because the gender issue was long neglected, and the gender issue was brought to the forefront by Marxists. But then my problem or difficulty with feminist criticism is, like any other school of criticism, there are feminists and feminists and feminists. There are Marxist feminists who recognize the class divide within a society and the subordinate position of the women in a bourgeois society, and therefore they take the help of Marxist ideology to fight for their equality. I can give one important instance Many of us know that every year we celebrate the International Women's Day. And if you look at the history of the International Women's Day, it was, I think, 1911. This Women's Day was started by Clara Zetkin, a great feminist and also a Marxist, a close friend of Lenin. She was asked by the journalist, now, we have so many feminists, so many champions of women, and how are you different, being a Marxist? And she gave that answer. I hope this will partly help her to understand. Says, upper class women and middle class women fight against their own men for equality. But we, the working class women, we fight along with our men for equality and social justice. Now you see the difference. In any case, the woman's position is subordinated in a patriarchal society. The continuity of a patriarchal society necessitates for feminists, even from middle class and upper class, to take the help from Marxist ideology in its concepts to understand the historical development. Because if she reads the wonderful book by Engels, The Origin of Family, Private Property, and the State, there you will get an excellent view, excellent exposition of the development from the pre-capitalism to the modern bourgeois society, how the women's position gradually was subordinated. To start with, there was no patriarchal society. If at all there was anything, it was matriarchy. But matriarchy gave way because of the production process and the division of labor. Without their knowledge, without being conscious, they became subordinated. They were relegated to the second level. Their world was confined to the kitchen, whereas men went out and plowed the land and then also wielded the sword, went to the battlefield, conquered territories, and in the process, patriarchy emerged. Now, this is not an eternal reality. It originated at a particular point in history where the socio-economic system, the process of production, played a very, very important role. Now, for the feminists, it is important to understand this moment of history, how a particular socio-economic system grows out of the old social order and leads to a new one. In that sense, I'm not really familiar whether this theory is applied consciously by feminist writers, but I understand the issues raised by them. There, Marxism will help them to fight better, because Marxism gives that ideological weapon which will be more powerful than any other ideological, liberal or bourgeois ideology.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. As you said, really, now I could get that there is a touch upon with Marx and Engels about consciousness that is derived from the material conditions. That is how we understand the Marxist theory. Am I right, sir? That is how
that is a philosophical premise. And then within materialism, there are so many strands: mechanical materialism, dialectical materialism. Dialectical materialism is the one practiced and promoted by Marx, Engels, and Lenin. It simply means you have to look at any given phenomenon in its totality, in its movement, with its flexibility. And even in Indian philosophical tradition, there is one metaphor. See, you can't step into the same waters in a flowing river twice, because everything changes. Nothing remains constant. And the same thing happens with natural phenomena, and it happens with the society also. Whether we are aware or not, that's a different thing. But if we have this philosophical tool, then we will observe the movement of society. How, even you take education system, the colonial education system, and then after independence, what happened, and now what is happening? The entire education system has become a thing of commerce for profit. From social obligation, now it has become a private business. The entire Indian education system has been transformed without anybody being aware of it. Now, this movement has to be understood with the concept of this dialectical method. The method of dialectics will help us to understand how a given phenomenon changes into something else which we never intended, which we never wanted.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Really, it's a good thing that you have distinguished us between the dialectical things. And now there is one question from Ajbro Engli. Okay, they were been confused with the statement that which comes first into existence? Is it material or idea? As they said, material comes first as giving references. On the contrary, ideas comes first. So materials as scientific use. What is that comment that you would like to share up on this?
Yeah,
What comes first?
I said the matter comes first, and from matter, ideas develop. For example, I would put the entire process of the evolution of the universe, evolution of Earth, to simplify it. What was the shape of the Earth a few billion years ago? Maybe in a gaseous form, in the form of fire. It came off as a part of the sun. At that time, there was no life in it. But after millions and millions of years, so many things take place, changes take place, and it creates an atmosphere where you can see Charles Darwin's evolution of species from one to the other, and then finally you arrive at the human being. And even the human being, I would refer you to look at Raghav Sangrityayan's From Volga to Ganges, and then from Ganges, Sindhu to Ganges. These are wonderful works of art reflecting the changing society. For example, when man was hardly distinguished from the animal, there was no such thing as even religion or the concept of God. They were hunting for survival. They hunted, they gathered food. But then when they settled with the river valleys, they accidentally discovered that they need not run for food. They can stay at one place, cultivate. And cultivation, that is agriculture, it's hardly 10,000 years old. And then you have produce, you have surplus. You develop the idea of property, and the property becomes the basis of the social division of labor. And it goes on, and you can see the distinct features in different geographical areas. In India, it may be one, or even within India, it may be in a particular form, in the Indus Valley civilization, and then the Vedic civilization, and then in the South Indian forms of property, kingship, state. All these things indicate that there was a time man did not have religion. He didn't have an idea of God. He didn't have an idea of so many cultural concepts which we are very much aware. So from that animal stage to the most modern one, hundreds of things happened. But this did not happen just like, some idea from the mind. It is shaped by the material reality, that is matter. In other words, I am, therefore I think. This is the dialectical approach. I think, therefore I am. That is idealism of Descartes. So in order to think, you must be there. Your being is determined by what exists, independent of your thinking. When we are born as children, we don't have any idea, but we the consciousness, derive ideas, acquire language, the mother tongue, etc., etc. So that is why matter comes first. From matter, nature evolves, and man himself is a product of nature. Man or woman.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And there is another one question, that is, how has the digital age influenced literary criticism, including the analysis of digital literature and the use of digital tools for research?
I think it is a great facility that the digital tools give us. Suppose I want to read some important piece of work, just go to Google, give that search word. I get 100 volumes of Mahatma Gandhi, or the complete works of Ambedkar, or Vivekananda, or any great world literature. That is one instance. Secondly, when you collect data, digital devices help us to categorize in no time. And then I want to listen to the recitation of a particular poem, say the Westland by T.S. Eliot. Go to YouTube. You listen to him. You hear his voice. And then so many wonderful movies made on Shakespearean drama, which otherwise we will not get an opportunity to see, whether it is Julius Caesar or Antony and Cleopatra, Hamlet, whatever. Now, these are some of the facilities given by the digital age, which 50 years ago we were hardly aware of. Similarly, see, the best example, instant example is I am talking and 197 teachers of English are listening to me. And even if the time is a constraint, they can always send the email, send their questions, wait for answers. You can categorize them. If there are 100 questions, I can categorize them into, say, 8 or 10 categories. And I can give answers to each category, which will satisfy them. So these are some of the things. I'm just giving off-the-cuff remarks, but digital devices help a lot, not only literature, in every discipline, every branch of epistemology, every branch of human effort. It's a great boon, but the only thing is, it should not dominate us. We should dominate technology. Otherwise, it will lead to technological determinism. In the age of AI, artificial intelligence, we should not become slaves of technology or the digital devices. As it happens, one who has the file, the computer, and the TV, I think many of our younger generation, they remain kind of slaves to these technological devices. Now we have to take them away. I think as teachers of English, we can help them how much time they should spend on these digital devices and for what purposes. And the other important thing is, in doing research, digital devices play a very, very important role in collecting information, data, and then looking at many things in a short way, which earlier would require us to spend months and years in libraries.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Really, you have touched upon with all the things over there. And I think the final question that we will have it right now. And what theoretical framework can provide a comprehensive understanding of the interplay between women's empowerment and education in literature? I think this question might be slightly touches upon with the Marxist feminism that touches upon with the same concept, I think so, sir.
I think the framework is very simple. The framework I would recommend is Marxist framework, and then the feminists, they have to identify the distinct issues which affect them in their everyday life and place them in the contemporary context and see the interconnection between the society and its forces and where they stand and what they really want to understand. I think that is a framework. And for that, the dialectical materialism as a philosophical tool will help them. And historical materialism will give them enough instances to see how once upon a time the matriarchy was the ruling gender. Let me not use class, the ruling gender, how it became subjugated and subordinated to the patriarchal society. I think this framework, theoretical framework, will help. And there is no separate literary work which talks about it, but the works produced by great feminist writers, we have to look at them from this framework, with this perspective. Then they will get many insights.
Thank you, sir. Really, I could feel that today it has been almost the touches upon with the, you have touched upon with the Marxist theory of literature that has been all from culture. How we change and culture, right, is almost all related towards to the economic base of the society. That is what I could say, that the theories, all the literary theories of Marxism that emphasize precise economical, social, historical conditions in which it is being written. And really, we are so happy that you have brought upon with the Borgias and how it has been and what has been the protection of the society that controls, and or how the role of class struggle in the plays with so many illustrations that is from the Shakespeare. And really, we were so happy to have you here, sir. Really, you touches upon with all the parts of the literary criticism.
But one gentle caution or a warning: we should not reduce everything to the economic base. The debate between the base and the superstructure in Marxist ideology is very important, but we have to read very carefully. Ultimately, the ultimate determining factor would be the economic base. But you can always supersede through your ideas, your thinking, your culture, your artistic creativity, artistic production. So many people, they think that a work of art is directly related to economic reality. It is not like that. So this caution I would like to make.
Yeah, yes, sir. Really, as you said, the historical materialism and dialectical materialism, both the things with the super, as you said, it is about superstructure. All the differences that you have given so clearly, and it was so good.
Thank you.
Vaibhav, sir, it's up to you right now, because it's a pack of something, a revival of learning that we could have as a professors right now. That is what I could say right now, sir. Vaibhav, sir.
Thank you very much, Vishnu Priyan sir, for a very wonderful moderation, for anchoring this session, putting for the questions, and the way sir was talking. I didn't want to stop. Just wanted to keep listening to sir, his explanation, etc. There are so many questions, but let me tell you, everybody, almost everybody has appreciated the way sir has deliberated this particular topic. Very important topic. We have been listening to it for so many years. We know many things, and yet there are many undiscovered areas which sir touched upon. So thank you so much, sir, for a very insightful, very informative and innovative talk on something that is very important to be discussed. And Vishnu Priyan sir, thank you for being the moderator of this webinar 115. You worked really well for this. Dear friends, thanks for your very overwhelming response to this. We have shared the feedback links. Certificates are given only to ELTAI members, students, and foreign nationals. We'll be very happy if you join ELTAI. There are more than 5,000 members of ELTAI, and it is always vibrant, organizing various events. And one such event is the webinar number 116. Kavin, may I request you please share the brochure of it? So the link has also been shared, and again there are some comments in the chat box that they are not able to register. Yeah, please keep patience. It will be working. There may be some issues here and there. So here is the flyer of the webinar number 116, English Language Teachers Association of India has been working very hard for the upliftment of the teachers, continuous professional development, and the topic is very innovative. It is to AI, artificial intelligence, or not to AI, leveling the playing field in an ELT classroom. And the resource person for the next webinar is Dr. Anej Somraj. The webinar will be hosted by Dr. Ashwin Ranjanikar, and the moderator is going to be Santosh sir. So do register for this and do join this. Tell your friends, colleagues, students to join. Hope you enjoyed this evening. The feedback link has been there. The registration link also has been there. Thank you so much. Do join our next webinars and other events, the national, the international conferences, annual conferences also. Thank you all. Thank you, Honorable Ramanujam sir, for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure.